Welcome to the Soul Grit Podcast. I'm Ann Taylor McNeese, and I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist. I also love Jesus, and I'm passionate about all things gospel and therapy. I created Soul Grit to be at the intersection of mental health and Christian faith. Christ followers need a place to ask questions and get answers about mental health. Join me as we dive into real stories and real questions from people who want to honor God with their hearts, souls, and minds. Hi, welcome back to the Soul Grit Podcast. This is Ann, and I'm here today with Kathy Kaspar. Hi, Kathy.
Hi, Ann. It's so great to be here.
Yeah, I'm excited to have this. This is our first talk in the new year, 2025. And you're here to talk today a little bit about what you do, which is success coaching, and specifically around recovering after divorce and having a fruitful, abundant life after this kind of trauma has hit you. You are a writer, an entrepreneur, a speaker, and you have this success after the storm. So talk about what that is.
Yes. So thank you for the introduction. So I went through a very traumatic divorce about 11 years ago. And because after going through that, did a lot of things to try to get help and deal with all the repercussions. And I just struggled for a long time. And I felt like I stayed stuck for a long time. I ended up getting to the point where I said, you know what, I can't find what I need, so I'm going to have to create it for myself. I'm a very structured person. And so I ended up starting Success After the Storm. And it is a business focused on Christian women who have gone through divorce or are going through a divorce and are struggling and really are trying to get their feet under them, get to a place where they're not feeling so lost and lonely and angry and all of the things that you feel when you've been blindsided by a divorce. And so that's why I started Success After the Storm. And that is where I spend a lot of my time now, is working with specifically Christian women, because faith is such an important part of my life. And really walking them through to get to the other side.
Yeah. Now, you mentioned to me that you're a certified coach. So, what kind of training did you have before you started working specifically with people who have gone through divorce?
So in addition to what I do with Success After the Storm, I also have a corporate career, and it has always been in HR. There are many different areas of HR. The area that I have always specialized in is talent development. And because of that, I early on in my career got exposure to coaching and fell in love with it.
Yeah.
And as a result, decided to pursue certification. Now, for anybody who's on social media, there are all kinds of certifications and all kinds of people who call themselves coaches.
Right.
So I am a certified life coach. But the gold standard for coaching that you do, like the executive level coaching in the corporate space, is ICF certification. And it's the gold standard because there you have to take a credentialed course. You have to have hundreds of hours of coaching under your belt. You have to go through a pretty rigorous testing process, submit recordings to even get to the lowest level of certification for them. So I am, in addition to being a life coach, I also have my ICF certification.
Great. I asked you about that because, as listeners know, I'm a marriage and family therapist. And so there is some crossover between the kind of work that you do and the kind of work that I do, in terms of listening to people, helping them set goals, helping them find what's blocking them from reaching those goals. But there are some big differences in the way that you're trained, the way that I'm trained, and what I can do with a client versus what you can do with a client, and how you specialize in the certain area. So I just wanted to make sure, like, groundwork, that people understand what we're talking about here. I do talk to a lot of coaches on the podcast, and it's been really interesting to me because Everybody has like a specialty that it's usually something to do with their life experience, and they say, I overcame this and I want to help people with this. Right.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, experience is the best preparation, I think. And you're right in terms of there are certain things you can do as a therapist that I cannot do as a coach in good conscience. Now,
Right.
I do have degrees in psychology, so I certainly have that background, but I don't have a counseling certification or anything of that nature. So yeah, the way that I think about the difference between the two, and it's not a clean black and white
Mhm.
thing, but what I will often tell people is if you are really dealing with trauma and you really need to get underneath like the trauma that's happened and do a look back and better understand what's happened and why it's happened and dig into that, that's a therapy situation. For me, coaching is more of a look forward and setting goals and then helping to ask really good questions to help the client kind of discover for themselves what it is they want to achieve and what's going to be the right way to achieve it for them.
Yeah. Yeah. And I would add that if it's something like habits or mindset or obstacles that you're putting in your own way, then a coach can help you with that. But if it's
Yes,
something like a mental health diagnosis, like depression or anxiety or bipolar or something more severe, that's not something that a coach can help you with. That's something you need a therapist for.
absolutely 100%.
But there is a lot of crossover. And so that's why I like talking to coaches, is because we get to have fun conversations. So back to our subject matter here. Tell us a little bit more about just how you created what you're doing now based on your experience of going through this really difficult divorce. Like, how did you get to here?
Yeah. So to answer that question, I'm going to give you a very short overview of life before I got
Yeah.
divorced. So I went to Christian schools my whole education, all the way through undergrad, and fell in love with a man my senior year of high school who was raised in a very different home life than mine,
Yeah.
and took us 10 years. We decided to get married. So we didn't get married till we were 27 rather.
Wow.
Um, and it was a challenging marriage because of a lot of reasons, none the least of which was we were not spiritually aligned. And I cannot emphasize enough how important that is in who you choose to marry.
Hmm.
But our marriage was hard, and I put him through 3 degrees, $100,000 worth of education, one of them being a law degree. We struggled with fertility, so I went through it with fertility treatments. I did get pregnant, and I have one child who is now 19. When my son was about 3, I discovered my then husband's first affair, and he was at that time very seriously in the throes of alcoholism. And for a lot of reasons, I chose to stay
Hmm.
and chose to do the really hard work of working through the betrayal, the addiction, the financial strain, and all of it. And thought we were to a better place. And when a few years later, a week before Christmas, I came home, was opening the mail, and opened a bill that had been sent to me to pay from my husband having met with another attorney to dissolve our marriage.
Hmm.
And I mean, I was blindsided. I had no idea he was even thinking about it, let alone acting on it, and then asking me to pay for it. And so that was the start of a very long traumatic period where I was forced to live with him as he systematically dismantled my life.
Mm.
And literally lost everything. So the bank accounts got drained. Um, he wouldn't allow me to buy him out of the house. So I had no place to live. After 18 years of marriage and $100,000 worth of education, had no money and received no money. And well, half the equity in a house we'd owned a very short period of time. So it was very little money. Um, he got the custody arrangement he wanted. He kept the furniture he wanted, he kept the Lexus, all the things. He also started an affair with my pastor's married sister-in-law. So I had to leave the church. I lost my family because they don't believe in divorce. I mean, it was like, when I tell you, it was 360 degrees of devastation. It was. And in all of that, the absolute worst part of it for me was losing half my life with my son.
Yeah.
That was the worst. He was not even 9 when this was all finalized, and it was I mean, I literally to this day cannot put into words the devastation of that. So, I as all of this is going on, I also was losing my job because my job was moving to Texas, and legally I was not allowed to move more than 10 miles outside of where my then ex-husband lived. So everything, like truly, like my life, you talk about in shambles, my life was in shambles. And I wasn't 25. Like at this point, I'm in my 40s.
Mm.
So it's like, what do you do? I mean, I was so overwhelmed and so devastated, and I'm so worried about my child and at war with my ex husband who's in deep spiritual rebellion. And I tried everything I knew to try. So I did therapy, and what happened for me with therapy was it was 45 minutes one time a week.
Mm.
And I would walk in the door with all of this stuff that's happened in the last week. And it was a lot of stuff.
Mhm.
And I would vomit all this stuff out because I had nowhere else to take it. I had nobody else to talk to about it. And I would get it all out. But at the end of 45 minutes, I'm ramped up even more because I've just
Right.
spent 45 minutes talking through all this, haven't resolved any of it. I wasn't working through a process. And so week after week after week, I would feel like it's great to have somebody to talk to. And that was really great, but it wasn't necessarily moving me forward. Also, this was very early in the process.
Yeah.
So I'm a huge proponent of therapy. Again, I have degrees in psychology. At that time, it wasn't enough for me. I'm sure if I'd had more hours to spend, I could, like, it would have done what I needed it to do. But I was doing that. I tried divorce care and kind of the same thing. It was a support group, it wasn't a healing group for me. I had friends, but none of them were divorced. They didn't know how to help. I certainly went to church, prayed, did Bible study, did all of that. And all of these things helped maybe in some small ways, but I was in such a horrible place. And truly, like I said, 360 degrees of devastation that I like, those things felt like I am literally, to quote Taylor Swift, I'm putting a band aid on a bullet hole. Like, this is not getting me where I need to be.
Yeah.
And after a long time, far too long, of knowing I was stuck, feeling stuck, being in a really bad place, I finally was like, I am not getting any younger. My son's not getting any younger. I have nothing's going to change until something changes. And at this point, the only option here is I'm going to have to do this for myself because everything I've tried hasn't been what I need. And because I am such a structure person, that's what caused me to start putting together, okay, what's the first thing I need? And I'm a writer, so kind of wrote that out and worked on step one for a while. And then I get to the point of, okay, now what would step two be? And I ended up just putting this whole process together. Really, I mean, it started just out of selfishness for me because I was like, I knew I was stuck and I knew I needed help and I knew the things I had tried weren't enough.
Wow. I'm amazed that you could think clearly enough during that time to be able to put that together.
Well, this is again, like I've been divorced 11 years.
Yeah.
So this wasn't like day one.
Right.
It was a process. And it was after being stuck, honestly, for a long time,
Mm.
where again, I just was like, I'm not 25. Like I got a choice here. Like, am I going to stay stuck year after year after year, or am I going to actually do something? Because this is miserable.
Can you tell us more about what feeling stuck was like? Like, what did that feel like?
It just, for me, it just felt like every day getting up, and it just, like, the best way I can describe it probably is just my life felt so gray.
Mm.
Like, there's no hope. there's no joy, there's no vision for the future, there's no anticipation that anything's ever going to get better or change. It just
Mm,
feels like it's day after dreary day of just drudgery.
mhm.
And that's miserable. It's a miserable place to be. And it's not how we're called to live.
Yeah, yeah. So can you take us through these steps that you mentioned? Like if you're coaching someone or they're part of your group, what are the steps they go through?
So I created a program that I take people through, and it's a 6 month program that literally walks people through step by step. What do you need to do to get from this place of where I was, which is just complete devastation? Like my world has been blown apart and shattered, and I don't know how to put one foot in front of the other right now. And so this program literally it just starts from that place, and the end goal is whatever your vision of success looks like. So, do you want a career? Do you want a different career? Do you want to be an entrepreneur? What kind of relationship do you want with your children? Do you want to get remarried? Whatever it is, you get to decide, and we put a plan in place for how to get you there.
Mm,
um, and that program it involves, of course, a lot of self work, but there's group coaching, so there's a lot of connection, and that is one of the things I find to be so important
mhm,
for women in this place, especially Christian women. Is divorce is so isolating. It's so isolating, even in today's world where it would seem like it's so commonplace that if you're a church person and you're going to church, like, not that people are like, great, you're getting divorced, but you would think people would be able to better help you and support you when you're going through something like this. And what I found, unfortunately, is that church for me really felt like whispers in the hallway. Like, people would see me coming and they'd like turn their head and act like I wasn't there, or they'd start whispering to each other. And
mm,
that is obviously not the support we need, but that happens a lot. I hear this a lot from people. And because of that, part of this program that I put together involves a lot of connection for women with other women going through the same thing and in the same place, because it's so important to be reminded you're not alone. You're going to get through it. You have friends. This is a new day. So your friend group may be different,
mhm,
but there are people around who will love you and support you and won't judge you for what you're going through and how you need to heal.
mhm. Yeah. I think that's really important that you're ministering to Christian women because other women may have a different perspective on divorce and why they got divorced. Maybe they wanted to or didn't want to, and it wasn't their choice. But um, for Christian women, it seems like there's more pain involved because we want to do this thing that we believe that honors God, which is to stay married, and sometimes that's not available to us. So now we
I
feel like we're not honoring God.
It's so true. And I have spent so much time just pondering that. And I think there are many layers to it, of course. Just a couple things that come to my mind, when we think about getting married in a church,
Mm,
there is such a focus on two becoming one.
mhm,
And it really is true. That is kind of, as a Christian, certainly, that was my perspective on marriage, is that um, you really do meld more into like a oneness and a unity.
mhm,
And when that suddenly gets ripped apart, the best way I can describe it, I don't know if you've ever seen like hardwood stairs that have the carpet strips on them. They get adhesed to the stairs with carpet tape.
yeah.
And that stuff is like, it's sticky in a way that like I've never experienced anything else. If you've ever tried taking that carpet tape off the stair tread, it's like you are literally ripping two things apart that were never meant to come apart. And it's a very violent process. That's how it feels to me,
Mhm,
or how it felt to me. It was just this very violent ripping apart of something that was never meant to come apart.
Mhm.
And so then as a woman, especially where and a lot of us were, raised and taught you're submissive to your husband has authority, your husband should shelter and protect. And when all of that's ripped away, it's not only very painful, but it really does leave you in this place of I feel like I have no identity. And I also feel very scared because now I feel like I don't have the shelter and protection that I should have. And man, I thought I was doing everything right. And I don't know where I went wrong. And then I'm getting judged because my marriage fell apart. And I was honorable. I'm not the one who was doing the things that I should have been doing, or whatever the case may be. So I agree with you. I think for everyone who's not wanting to get divorced, it's traumatic.
Yeah.
I think there is a layer in the Christian world that creates some additional complexities for sure.
Mhm. Yeah. Now, I've heard from other people, like in my church circles, and I'm hearing it for you now, that a lot of people feel judged when they get divorced. And I think I'm not a person who has experienced divorce before, and so I don't know what this feels like exactly. But I know that there have been times when I've m- been with women who say that they feel that, and it's hard for me to understand because I'm thinking I'm not judging you. I'm not.
Yeah.
Like, I understand your situation is different now, but I don't want you to feel judged. So how can I, as a Christian woman who's still married, um, communicate that I'm not judging? How do I be non-judgmental?
That's a great question. That is a great question. And as with everything, I think there are layers here. So I'm going to just speak for myself and what I experienced. I have several friends, sadly, my age, who are widows.
Mm.
And when their husbands passed away, the church absolutely like flocked to them and embraced them and would do meal trains and send people to sit with them and be in their house with them and holidays and all kinds of things as they should. Like horrible situations. Wonderful that that happened.
Yeah.
In my case, like I said, church was like whispers in the hallway for me. And the only thing that I can take away from that is people don't know what's happened behind closed doors. And they do make judgments. When a marriage falls apart, they do make judgments. In
Mm.
my case, I was married to a very charming, charismatic trial attorney, and people loved him. To this day, when I go places, people will be like, "Oh my gosh, we just think he's such a celebrity." And I'm like, "Great, that's great." Um, they make judgments based on what they see and what they think they know. And most of the time, it is not the full story.
Mhm.
So, what I would say to you in cases where you've got a friend or friends who are going through this, I think one of the best things you can do is just love them through it to the extent that you can. You
Mm.
can't be their everything,
Yeah.
but you can be a friend who will listen when you've got time and can provide encouragement. And some of the most important encouragement to women going through this is I know it's not fair.
Mhm.
I know it's not right. I know it's not just. God didn't do this. And there are times when you can say that and times when you can't.
Mhm.
But to always bring it back to God is a good God. And I am praying for you that you are going to be able to see the light at the end of the tunnel, that you're going to have encouragement, that we will see the goodness of God come through this, even if it's not right now. And for me, that's been one of the best things friends have done for me is when I've been in a really hurting place and dealing with things that are really unholy, they don't just pat me on the head and go, "Oh, but God's a good God." They'll
Mhm.
go, "Holy cow, we're really angry with you and for
Mhm.
you. That is not okay. Like, these are not okay things that you're dealing with."
Yeah.
And so they'll meet me where I'm at emotionally, but at the same time, we'll always come back to God is still a good God. Even Kathy, if you can't see it right now, and I know you probably can't,
Mhm.
I'm going to tell you that God is still a good God and I'm going to pray for you.
Mhm.
And The other thing that friends will do that's very, very helpful is not on a specific cadence, but on occasion, they'll just text me, I'm thinking of you and I prayed for you this morning. Just want you to know that.
Mhm.
I can't tell you how many times I've gotten a text like that on a day where I felt like my world was falling apart. And that text will make all the difference because what it says to me is, Kathy, you're not forgotten
Yeah.
when it feels like you are.
You may not have that protection and shelter that you felt like your husband was providing for you, but you have people in your corner that are going to look out for you and lift you up in prayer.
And that, like, praying for your friends, period, is so important. But when you have a friend going through any kind of a crisis, especially something like this, I think is so important because prayers do change things. They absolutely do.
Mhm. And I'm sure that you have women that you work with that, question God's, like you mentioned, God is good even through this, but there are times when we ask if God is good, and I did everything I was supposed to. I was a good wife. I did what my husband needed. I wasn't unfaithful. I always paid the bills, made the dinner, took care of the kids, whatever it was that you were doing. Why did God allow this to happen?
Yeah. It is a very common question. And it's a heartbreaking one because the pain that's sitting underneath that of, wait a minute, I've really believed you, God. I believe that the Bible is true, that you love me and that you're a good father. And now I'm looking at you going, if you're a good father, how on earth did you let this happen? Like, that doesn't, I can't make that work because I would never allow this to happen to one of my children. Like, are you kidding? I get it. And I understand the pain that's behind it because I've been there myself. And what I always have to come back to, because it's the truth, is God is a good father and we have free will. And unfortunately, there is evil in this world. Satan is very real. And when people choose to go off the rails spiritually and not be the person God created them to be and make painful and bad choices, there are consequences. And oftentimes, the consequence of those choices is marriages get blown apart and families get blown apart. And there's a lot of hurt and pain.
Mhm.
It's not that God did it, but yes, God will allow it. Now, it's up to us whether we go, I'm really angry with you, God. And so my story is going to stop right there. I'm mad at you. I'm hurt. I don't trust you anymore. I'm done and I'm going to walk away. Like, we can make that choice. Hopefully, we don't. If we instead go, God, I don't understand it. And my heart is broken. And I want to believe you're a good God, but I can't see it right now. But I am going to hold on to hope that somehow I'm going to see the beauty for ashes, like you say we will.
Mhm.
When you hold on to that hope and continue having faith in the storm, in the pain, and work through the steps of healing, you do get to a place where you can go, man, that was awful. Like, I will never look back on what I've been through and go, that was fun. That was awful. And I hate that it's my son's story, but I can see the beauty that has come out of it in so many different ways. And that beauty is there because God is a good God, and also because I didn't throw God out when all of this went crazy in my life.
Yeah. Well, we're talking right now about women who might feel like I didn't do anything wrong and still all these terrible things happen. But
Okay.
what about women who do feel a sense of guilt? Like maybe they were unfaithful, or maybe they realized after the fact that something in their life was preventing them from being the wife they could have been. Like how do we deal with guilt around this area?
Yeah, and I think even if you didn't quote do anything wrong,
Mhm.
meaning you were faithful and all of those things, I firmly believe when a marriage falls apart, anyone's going to look back and go, oh, maybe I should have done that differently, or maybe I should have been better at that.
Mhm.
If, in addition to that, you were the party that stepped up outside the marriage or did something that created significant damage that caused the marriage to end, it does create guilt. And ultimately, for many people, that's where shame comes in. And shame is so destructive. It's so destructive, whether it's over something that legitimately we did that we need to work through, or just something that we feel like our marriage ended and we're really embarrassed and we feel shame over it. It's very isolating. It causes us to start just immediately attuning to lies instead of truth. And so I understand looking back and going, maybe I should have done something different, or feeling guilt about certain things. In my case, my husband's first affair, like there was a lot of judgment over me and my life that I didn't just get over that. Like I didn't just get over it easier or faster or whatever. And when I look back on that, I'm like, yeah, should I have gotten a different kind of help? I probably should have. I will like stand before God and say, I really, really tried.
Yeah.
I really did.
Yeah.
Um, do I have some, do I feel some guilt about, could I have done that better? Sometimes. Um, but all of that to say, for women who, for whatever reason, are feeling that, all I can say is it is not where you are meant to live. It is not. None of us are perfect. And that is exactly why Jesus died on the cross. Like, he died to forgive us our sins. And the most important thing at this point is for you to really be able to forgive yourself for whatever you think you may have done wrong and release that. We can't change what's happened. We can't change the consequences of anything that we've done, but we can forgive ourselves and just say, Father, I'm sorry. Please forgive me. And he does. And help me to walk this out. Help me to have grace for myself, like I would have grace for my best friend, like I would have grace for my child. Help me have grace for myself and really live like I am forgiven, because I am.
Mm. I know that a lot of women that I work with, and men too, but we're talking more specifically about women here. One of the reasons why they might stay in the marriage is because of children, and
Oh,
they
yeah.
want their children to grow up with both parents, even if there's some toxic things going on. And one of the big problems with guilt after a divorce is that, like, if I had just stuck it out, then my kid would have both their parents in the home, or I wouldn't have to split time, as you said, like 50% of your kid is life is not with you now. So let's talk a little bit more about like that parenting transition from being a married parent to now being a single parent with a custody schedule.
That's very broad. But
Yes.
what would you like? Is there something specific that you want to talk about there? Because there's like
Well,
I can talk
let's start
about
with
that.
this. If you're feeling guilty about ending your marriage because of what your kids are going through, like what kind of hope can you offer to moms or dads that are dealing with that?
Yeah. I relate to that question so well because I was in an absolute toxic, and it's such a toxic situation. And that was my tunnel vision focus, was my son, my son, my son. I don't want him to grow up in a broken home. His dad grew up in a broken home, and I know what that's done to him. I don't want it for my son. And it got to the point for me where I went to work one morning, and I was working for Toyota at the time, and we had this open floor plan. And so, like, half of the 1,200 person campus, you could like walk onto the floor and you could see half the floor. And then there was like a center part that was open. So, anyway, there were like over 100 of us that when you walked on the floor, you could see. And there were no like dividing walls. It was just
Yeah.
like space that you shared. And I walked in one morning and sat down, and one of my friends who sat next to me, who of course knew what was going on because, again, no walls, everybody just kind of knew, and I'd worked there a long time, had tears streaming down her face. And I was like, what's going on? And she goes, I'm so scared that I am going to get up someday and see you on a story of Nightline or Dateline and regret for the rest of my life that I didn't intervene.
Mm.
And I remember at that point going, oh my gosh, like that's serious because this is a good friend of mine and she
Yeah.
knew what was going on. And I still didn't file the papers for the divorce.
Mhm.
But at that point, I was like, okay, I probably do need to get out of this. Like, this, like, I was scared. I was scared for my safety for sure. Um, and so I share that to say it is a heart like, it is heartbreaking. I'm not gonna sugarcoat that. It's heartbreaking to see, your children go through divorce and the fallout, and because we are all unique, every child handles it differently.
Mhm.
I don't love this, story that we get told a lot, "Oh, kids are resilient, they'll be fine." I think that that is something that we tell ourselves to try to make ourselves feel better. And so, what I will say is, first and foremost, you have to do what you have to do. If you are not safe, if you're in a situation where you are being exposed to all kinds of things you should not be exposed to as a married person, you've got to take care of yourself and do it in prayer and do it with prayer cover and trust that the Lord is going to be with you even in those really hard moments and be with your children.
Mhm.
In my case, post divorce, we each had 50-50 custody of our son. And I don't call it co parenting. I
Mhm.
call it co influencing because I don't believe it's co parenting. In my case, it hasn't been.
Mm.
And it is heartbreaking when one of the two parties is very spiritual and godly and the other is in deep rebellion.
Mm.
The things that your children or your child gets exposed to, it is truly heartbreaking. And I don't sugarcoat that. But here's where the hope is because a lot of people are in this situation. I will continue to say prayer changes things. And
Mm.
I really do believe, as mothers who are prayer warriors over our children, those prayers are especially powerful. I really believe it. I've seen it in my own life with my son. I've heard it from enough other people. I believe it to be true.
Mhm.
And the thing that I will say is you cannot control what goes on in the other home.
Right.
You cannot control what's being said, what your children are being exposed to, how they're being taken care of. If it's a safety issue, you need to get attorneys involved. If it's just, I don't like the way they're doing things, you can't control that.
Mhm.
Um, as my son has gotten older in life, there have been very painful moments where I've had to have some hard conversations with him.
Mhm.
But it is my job as a parent to have those conversations and to share wisdom and to provide information as much as I can. And then I have to give it to God and go, okay, God, I've done what I can.
Yeah.
Continue to give me wisdom, continue to give me discernment, bring peace to my heart. And I'm trusting that you are in this. Somehow you're in this, even when it's really hard and messy.
Yeah. That's really hard. Um, let's talk a little bit now about the church, and I'd like to talk about what could the church do that would help people in this situation better than what we're doing right now.
Mhm. Yeah. It's hard. Like, this is such a hard topic. I think part of the issue that's, I think, so hard, especially for Christian women, is all of a sudden now you're single and alone and you go to church. And at least in my case, what started happening is all of a sudden my female friends were like, we don't sit with us. We don't, you don't get too close because now I was a threat.
Mm.
Now there was a concern about, don't think I want you around my husband. You I don't know exactly all the reasons why you got divorced. And it did very much feel like I kind of got labeled as like something I absolutely wasn't.
Mm.
And so that's a personal thing. Like, I don't think that's an overarching church thing. I think that's more of a just
Well,
as a
to
friend
be
thing.
fair, we're probably not talking to a lot of church leaders here. We're talking to individual Christians who want to honor God in the way that they treat their divorced brothers and sisters, right?
Yes. Yeah, very true.
Mm.
Um, I would say for church leaders, like make whatever it is you're doing, keep in mind that everybody attending isn't married.
Yeah.
So if you're doing events and maybe some single parents want to join, is there childcare set up, or can they bring their kids and have their kids sit with them? I was in a number of situations when my child was younger where I had male leaders go, well, no, you can't bring your kids because we said no to everybody else. And I'd be like, but I don't have childcare and he's going to literally sit with me. And the answer was just no. And on the one hand, I understand, like, you can't just have children running around. Like, of course, I understand that. But on the other hand, we need to be a little more inclusive in what we offer and how we offer it.
Mhm.
Um, and just, I think, just be more aware and more attuned to the ways that people are struggling, especially through the holidays or,
Mm.
through some of these really difficult things with co-parenting and children and all of those struggles. It's hard in ways that other things are not hard.
Yeah.
And I think it's really important as church leaders to be aware of that, and where you can be a little more inclusive and sensitive to what's going on around you.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. My husband and I lead small groups at our church, and we lead a family group where people do bring their kids. And uh, we always get this question, well, I'm not married, but I have these kids. Am I still included? Am I welcome? And we always say, yes, you are welcome. Bring your kids. We want to get to know you. We want to love on your kids just as if you were coming with a partner. And I know it can be awkward to walk into a group where it seems like everybody else is partnered off, but I'm trying to create a space where, like, I like you as a person, not because you have a certain status of relationship.
Yeah, that is hard. I have a couple of single friends, and we talk about it a lot. Like, there are plenty of single women in churches. There are not a lot of single men in churches, and walking into those settings can be very hard because it does kind of feel like, I mean, some of them are just frankly labeled as this is a Bible study for married people. And
Right.
so you're like, okay, well, I can't go to that. Well, they don't have Bible studies for single people my age. So,
Right.
okay, you can't go that. So then your only option is an all female Bible study, which, okay, that's great. But it, like,
You don't get the brother aspect of
no,
that. Yeah.
no.
I get that. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm trying to do better work in that area because there are a lot of whether it's never married or previously married or widowed or whatever it might be, there's a lot of people who are not partnered, and they have just as much place in the church and just as much to offer. um,
So true. It is so true.
mhm. Well, can you tell us a little bit more about how people can find out what you're doing, how they can get a hold of you, um, join anything that you have going on right now?
Yeah, so probably the best way to get a hold of me is my website. It is all one word, successafterthestorm.com. And as I said, I run this program. It's a 6 month program. You can join it at any time because the way I have it set up is kind of a rolling start. And then you join the group coaching calls no matter where you are and where other people are in the program. So there's that. And then as we've talked about, I am a certified coach. And so I also work with people one on one in coaching situations. Because sometimes people are just like, I don't really want to do a group thing. I really need more of the one on one. I'm an introvert, so I understand that too. I think there are pros and cons to both. Um, but I love like the one-on-one coaching. I think for somebody who's really just struggling and feeling stuck and feeling like, feeling a lot of shame and just like
Mhm.
maybe I need a little more care and attention, it's a great option.
Yeah. I just thought of this too. I was going to ask you this before. What do you wish your therapist had known when you came out of your divorce in the beginning?
I really wish my therapist had been better at directing the therapy as opposed to just letting me come in and just vomit everything out.
Mhm.
Because again, like in a week's time with everything I was dealing with, I could have talked for hours about
Mhm.
everything that was going on with me, with my son, with
Yeah.
just the chaos in general. Um, but I really believe what could have been so much more effective is if the therapist had been like, okay, we're going to spend 20 minutes doing a download. Tell
Mhm.
me whatever you want to tell me.
Mhm.
And then we're going to spend 30 minutes or however much time is left talking about things we need to talk about to start moving you forward, because you talking every week about how upset and mad you are about all this stuff going on is just keeping you upset and mad. It's not moving you forward.
Mhm. Okay. Well, I know there are some therapists that listen to this, but there are also many other people who are interested in therapy, and so I just wanted to bring that up, that that is a difference. Like, um, maybe it wasn't the best fit of therapist for you because some of us are more directive than others. Some of us work better with like a more framework that's built on interventions versus just, like you said, validation and empathy and like giving you a chance to vomit the things you need to do. There's different styles, right?
Yeah. Yes, and a couple of things on that. So first of all, I'm saying this now with the benefit of hindsight.
Yeah.
When I was at the front end of this, that's what I thought I needed. Like I had so like I was literally at the lip of the dam all the
Right.
time. And so everything was just throwing me over, throwing me over, throwing me over because there was just so much going on. And so I needed an outlet to talk about that stuff. My friends were like, okay, we've heard like we got other stuff to deal with in life. So again, hindsight being what it is,
Mhm.
I would say I think I really needed somebody to be more directive, like you said. The other thing I would say is when stuff like this happens, like I wasn't in a relationship with a therapist before all this blew up. So I didn't have someone that I was established with.
Yeah.
So your life is on fire, everything's hitting the fan. You're just trying to find somebody who's in network,
Yep.
who is Christian, who's got time on their schedule, who works with your work schedule. Because this was back before COVID and I had to be in the office all the time.
Yeah.
So I found somebody, but to your point, it was not the best fit.
Hmm.
I will say again and again, because again, degrees in psychology, I believe so strongly in therapy. When you find the right fit and somebody who's aligned with you from a spiritual and value standpoint,
Hmm.
it can be transformational. It absolutely can be. And I strongly, I'm a big fan of therapy and strongly believe that. It's just for me at the time with everything going on, it wasn't what I needed.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'll say this: when I'm working with clients that have a lot going on, life is very chaotic. I will explain to them that it might feel for a while like we're just putting out fires because you have so much going on. It's like every new week there's a new fire, right? And if we're constantly putting on fires, we're not getting to any of the deeper work. And so we have to kind of call that out into the open and say, look, what we're doing in this session right now is just dealing with the here and now because it feels very chaotic to you. And when you're ready, we're going to go deeper. And sometimes just even calling that out into the open gives you that hope that, okay, I can trust this person, that she knows what she's doing and she's going to take me there when I need to go there. And then for me as a therapist, I have to kind of continually bring that up to say, okay, this is going to be a little bit painful because you've got all of this stuff going on in your brain. But I think you're ready to address what's underlying this. And maybe when we address that deeper issue, it's going to take care of some of those things that keep firing at you, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. And you're absolutely right. Like just having somebody say that would have been so helpful. It would have been so helpful. But I was just like a house on fire. I mean,
Yeah.
it was just so
Yeah. And
much.
so
And
I know you probably couldn't have said this in the state that you're in, but I just want to say this on the podcast so that I can encourage other people that are in therapy. You can say these things to your therapist. You can say, and I've had people, was just thinking about this morning that I had a client one time that said, I enjoy all the chit chat and stuff, but I need something deeper. And I was
Oh,
like, oh, I hadn't realized she thought we were chit chatting. But but she called me out because she needed something. She needed me to take her deeper. And a lot of times as therapists we're just following the client's lead, and she was telling me what she needed and I responded. Like, I got stuff that I know. I went to school, I did a lot of practice for this. I
right.
got stuff I can give you, but I have to know that you're ready to go there. And so it's okay to tell your therapist, I need you to be more directive, or I feel like I need a structure. Can we look at my goals again? Any of those kinds of statements.
That would be, yes, that's very good advice. And again, for me, like, I don't
I'm
know
doing
that I
that
could have
right.
said it at that point in time, because at that point in time, what it felt like I needed was I just got to relieve some of the pressure. I just got to get some of this off my chest. And so that's what I was trying to do.
Yeah.
Now, again, I would just ramp up, and that wasn't so helpful for me, but it is so true. Like, for me personally, the structure is so important. And it would have been so beneficial to have somebody else guide that, to go, hey,
Hmm.
I know what you need. You don't know what you need because you've not been here before, but I've actually done this before. I've worked with people who have been in your place.
Yeah.
I know how to help you. Do you trust me? And
Hmm.
are you willing to take some of these steps, even when you don't necessarily want to, and when it may not make so much sense?
Yeah. Yeah. And the blessing of this now, years later, is that you are offering that guidance for other people. You're saying, I
Absolutely.
got you. I know how to lead you.
Absolutely. Yeah. And, you know, it's hard. Like, on the one hand, it's heartbreaking because I hate that there are so many people going through this and struggling. And it's like a universal feeling. I don't care the age, I don't care the circumstance, I don't care the economic situation. Like, the universal feeling is I'm broken, I'm lost, I'm angry, I'm alone, I feel hopeless. And I hate that people are going through that.
Mhm.
The beauty of it for me is, like I said, I struggled for so long and I went through so much. I mean, I shared a little bit of my story at the end of this, but that's not even the tip of the iceberg. And what all of that's done for me is, one, it's given me great insight and wisdom, two, great empathy, and three, great, like, I am very, very, able to be direct with kindness, but to say, look, you can't heal yourself right now, but I really know how to do this. I promise you, I know how to do this. If you'll take the steps,
Yeah.
we're gonna get there together.
Mhm. That's great. Well, I want to ask you this final question. What are you doing for soul care?
I love that question. That is such a great question. And so, as you said at the beginning of this is going to be the first podcast of the new year. And that's always a time for me of reflection. I'm not a believer in New Year's resolutions, but what I do like to do is pray in the new year
Mm.
and really ask the Lord for, do you have a word, like literally a word
Mhm.
for me to sort of focus on this year, or just kind of a general direction? And last year, it was really change, and there was a lot of change that happened in my life last year. So this year, for soul care, I'm continuing that and really focusing on reflecting back on 2024, and what are the answers to prayer from
Yeah.
2024. And there were some huge answers to prayer last year. Like, when I think about where I started 2024 and what I was praying for, and some of the ways those prayers were answered, just huge answers to prayer. There are still some things I'm waiting on. So, heading into 2025, I'm really focused on, okay, Lord, I'm doubling down on faith for this year.
Mhm.
I really want to spend more intentional time in the Bible, not just praying. I do have one of the biggest parts of my soul care is quiet time every morning. It is the first thing I do when I get up.
Mhm.
But I'm gonna tweak the dial a little bit and spend a little more time reading scripture and meditating on scripture this year, and a little less time just in talking and prayer. Still praying.
Okay.
Um, and then the other big thing I do for soul care is I am extremely careful about my inner circle. And that inner circle I am very dedicated to and spend very intentional time with,
Hmm.
because that's where I get fed and that is where I get encouraged. And that is where, when the days are hard and when I feel like, man, I've been waiting in faith for answers to some of these prayers for forever, I'll get renewed.
Yeah.
Um, and so for me, those really, like, it's about staying grounded in scripture, staying grounded in prayer, and surrounding myself with people who will encourage me and pray for me as well.
Yeah. That's great. Thank you
Yeah.
for sharing those with us.
Yeah.
And I want to just reiterate that Kathy's website, Success After the Storm, will be in the show notes. You can find it there. Also, did you mention your Instagram or any social media? Do you do?
So here's the thing for me about social media. I am on Instagram. It is not where I like to spend my time right now because I actually have a corporate job. So I am in an office during the day and then I do Success After the Storm and coaching and all of that around the edges of my corporate job.
Okay.
And so time is finite. And
All
when I
right.
think about where do I want to spend my time, how do I like to spend my time, I want to be doing this and having these types of conversations, interacting with people, helping individuals one on one, as opposed to focused on reels and online content. I know it's important, but time being
No, I totally
finite.
agree.
Yeah.
That's not where I want to be living either. And so you don't find a ton of content from me on social media. But sometimes people really like that's how they find people. So I always like to mention it if it's there. But it sounds like the best way to reach out to you would be through your website. So make sure if you're listening, you can click through the show notes to find that. And I just want to, again, Kathy, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom and a little bit of your pain, but also the way that God has brought new hope into your life in this conversation.
Thank you so much for having me. And I do just want to encourage anyone listening who is going through a divorce or recently divorced. It does get better. It does get better. I just encourage you to find the right person to help you move through this storm successfully and as efficiently as possible.
Thank you, Kathy.
The Soul Grit podcast is a production of Soul Grit Resources. You can find more at soulgritresources.com or on the socials at Soul Grit Resources. You can email me at info@soulgritresources.com.